Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
to set the stage for this story, we must go back to the far-off year of 1988. The location is the Cascade Mountains of Oregon. I was 10 years old, and with me was my mom, dad, best friend, and our golden retriever, Amber. We were very much an outdoor family, and had many camping trips before this and since, but to this day, when I think about it, I still remember the terror I felt that weekend so long ago. After a brief talk with my father recently, it kind of came back to the front of my mind. He also was able to fill in a few details that I had forgotten. This holiday was like many others. We packed up the station wagon with everything we would need for a hike into one of our favorite lakes to camp at. To make this trip even more exciting for me was the fact it was my birthday weekend and I got to pick this lake. After we arrived at the trailhead and got our packs on, my dad got his sidearm out and strapped it on his belt. In Oregon, open carry was permitted in national forests, and my dad always had a gun on his hip while in the woods, which always added a sense of security. We had a close call with a bear one time in which it came in handy. The lake was about a 4-mile moderate hike in though some thick forest, but the trail itself was well maintained. It was never very busy, so it was going to be a very pleasant hike in. We started off on our hike, and back in the 80s it was not uncommon to have your dog off leash on the trails in the forest, so we let Amber run and do her thing. She was a good dog and never ran off for too long or jumped on people. She did love people though, and speaking of people, we had not seen anyone else on the trail after about 2 miles in on the hike, which was nice since it was just all of us talking, laughing, and enjoying nature. My best friend and I started to hike ahead of everyone else because we were so energized and excited about finding the first and best tent spot once we got to the lake. Amber was bounding ahead of us and having a great time too. We were about 20 yards ahead of my parents when Amber stopped dead in her tracks. I thought she maybe saw a chipmunk or something, maybe a bird, but her hackles came up and she let out the lowest of growls. She never growls, so we stopped walking, and I thought maybe a bear or deer or something was just off the trail, and she saw or heard it. We immediately started walking backwards and my parents caught up to us. My dad asked us what was going on. I told him that Amber is up the trail and is growling at something. He tells us girls to stay back with my mom, and he walks ahead to where Amber was at on the trail. My dad gets up to her and looks around. I hear Amber whimper a bit while looking off the trail. My dad comforts her and calls her back and walks back to us. He says it must have been an animal and he did not see anything right off the trail or ahead of us. He says to let him take the lead and we continue to hike. It did not take long before it was forgotten, and Amber and the rest of us are all having a good time again. We arrived at the lake, and much to my delight, there was no one else there camping. The water was clean and blue, and the shade from the trees made the whole scene just perfect. My friend and I found the best spot to set up our tent, and my parents followed suit. After we had camp set up, my folks went off to fish just down the hill, and my friend and I took off with Amber to walk around to the other side of the lake to catch salamanders. We only made it about an eighth of a mile when Amber stopped and started to growl. We stopped and looked around and heard brush rustling. Then right in front of us a man walked out of the trees. Amber stayed right by our sides and started to bare her teeth. He was taller than my dad, so at least 6'4", was very skinny but had very broad shoulders. He was clean cut and was wearing black jeans and a white polo shirt with loafers. I mean, he did not look like he had hiked at all or was even dressed for the outdoors. He almost looked like he came out of church. We just stood there trying to process the situation when Amber began to bark. The guy just stood there, not moving, and he smiled. Like the creepiest smile. It felt like someone who thought that was what a smile was supposed to look like. Amber kept barking, and this got my parents' attention, and they looked up to us and called out to us to come back. We complied and started to walk back towards them. My dad met us halfway and told us to go back to the campsite, and he was going to talk to this guy. We got back to our camp and my mom sat with us. I could hear my dad asking the guy if he needed help or was he a fellow camper who had just set up a camp away from the lake. My dad was being polite and calm, but I could see he was on guard and trying to feel out the situation. Now is the time to mention that my dad was retired Army and could be very intimidating when needed. The conversation continues. The guy told my dad he was just on a walk and did not mean to intrude on us. The guy says goodbye and walks back into the woods. My dad walked back to camp, sat down, and told us that he thinks the guy may just be a new camper and does not know much about the outdoors. But my dad said that he got a weird vibe off him and would be keeping an eye out for him. Amber stayed by our side. It was calm. mom, yet she kept looking towards the direction the guy went. A bit more time goes by, and we have a nice campfire going and the sun was starting to set. We cooked some dinner and made s'mores afterwards. My friend and I decided to go to our tent and read some books and tell each other some scary stories. Amber followed us to the tent and laid right outside at the door. My parents walked down to the lake to sit, have a beer and just chill. They were never more than 50 yards away. Not long after my parents walked away, I hear Amber start to growl, then we hear footsteps coming from the woods behind our tent. My friend and I turn off our flashlight and go quiet to listen. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the woods. We then hear heavy breathing and a grunting sound. Amber starts to bark, and we then hear the footsteps retreat to the woods. Amber whimpers a bit, and I then hear my parents walking back to the camp. I go out and tell them what happened. My dad said that he heard Amber barking and that is why they came back up. I ask my dad what we should do, what is going on, and if that strange guy was the one creeping around. He tells me that we will see about moving camp in the morning since we still have 3 days left on the trip, and nothing has happened to warrant just leaving, but he said that we will play it by ear and just be a little more vigilant, and if something changes, we will decide what to do next. He tells us to try to get some sleep, and we all turn in for the night. The next morning, we get up and have breakfast. After breakfast, we head down to the lake to fish. It was a beautiful day, and we were having so much fun the events from the prior day were almost forgotten. We decided around lunchtime that we would go for a short hike to the waterfall that is up from the lake. We were gone for only about an hour, and when we came back, we found our tents opened and our sleeping bags drug out on the ground. My dad tells us to hang back with mom, and he goes to investigate. He comes back and says nothing is missing, but it was not an animal that did this. He says we should break camp, hike back to the car, and find another spot to camp for the next couple of days. I could tell my dad was not wanting to frighten us, but I heard the urgency in his voice. I was very disappointed, but if it meant we could enjoy the rest of the trip and not worry about some creep messing with us, then it was worth it. We broke camp and started our hike back. Dad was in the lead, and we were double timing it and made it back to car in record time. As we walk over to the car, we see that one of our tires was flat. Not a big deal, we always had a spare, but when my dad bent down to start taking the lugs off, we swore. It was not just flat, someone slashed the tire. Dad changed that tire in record time and we threw everything into the car, and he goes to turn the car on, but it would not start. Dad swears, gets out of the car and pops the hood. He says crap. It turns out someone took our spark plug wires. Old cars like that Chevy wagon did not have internal hood releases, you could just pop the hood from the outside. Dad slams the hood, says some very colorful words, and kicks some rocks. We were stuck, and no one else was at the trailhead. We were stranded. My parents are calm under pressure, and after a few minutes of discussion it was decided that my dad would start walking down the road until he could hitch a ride to town and go to the auto parts store. Mom and the rest of us were going to wait with the car and look for someone to hopefully pull into the trailhead and help us. A few hours go by, and no one has come to the trailhead. It is getting hot, and we are hungry and tired. My mom makes us some lunch and we go to sit under a tree to cool off. Amber is by our side and was calm, but then we hear a voice. Amber leads up and starts to whimper. The creepy guy from yesterday comes down the trail and is asking my mom if we need help. My mom tells him we are fine, that it is being settled and my dad will be back soon. This creep then tells her that his camp is close and he is parked on the old fire road that is near the lake and asks us if we would like to come back to his camp and wait until my dad returns. Mom sternly tells him no, that we will just wait here and thank you anyway. He does not like this. He tells my mom that it's not safe out here for a pretty lady and 2 young girls. My mom, like my dad, is no pushover and asserts herself again that we do not need any help and to please just leave us alone. The guy just stands there, smiles wide, and then just turns around and leaves. My mom is visibly shaken, and us girls were just a bit scared. My mom comes over to us and tells us that we need to stay close, do not wander, and that we will be okay. My friend and I are really kind of freaked out and are just hoping my dad will make it back soon. After about another 30 minutes, the creepy guy comes back. This time though, he is not alone and has a slightly younger guy with him. The other guy is dressed as a yuppie camper and had a very stern look on his face. My mother stands her ground as they approach. Amber starts to low growl and her hackles go up. The 2 guys flank us, and one of them flashes a gun tucked into his belt. The older guy tells us that we need to go with them and that they were not asking. My mom backs up next to us and without taking her eyes off them reaches to her belt and pulls out her Bowie knife. My mom said we will not be going and that they need to leave now. The 2 men did not even flinch at this and said that we will come with them or they will hurt us. At this moment, moment though, Amber goes from just growling to barking and puts herself between us and them. This makes the guys stop. My mom yells that they need to leave now. They start backing up, and at that moment we hear a truck pulling into the trailhead parking lot. At the sight of the truck, the guys start to walk away fast and disappear into the tree line. The truck was a forest ranger, and he had my dad with him. My dad jumped out of the truck and ran over to us, asking if we were okay. The ranger came over and asked who those men were and if we were okay. My mom explained everything while my dad hugged us girls and told us we will be okay. The ranger takes off to go looking for the men. My dad tells us that he was about 5 miles from the town when the ranger picked him up and took him the rest of the way to get the part for the car. He then drove him back to our car. After hearing what happened, my dad was pissed and wanted to find the guys who tried to kidnap us and that had been terrorizing us for the past 24 hours. The ranger came back and told us that he had almost caught up to them, but they sped away in their truck with a camper in tow. They had been parked behind a small ridge behind the lake on an old loggy road. He did not get a plate, but he radioed a description of the men and their truck and camper to the local sheriff's office. He also took our information and said he would pass it on to them. He waited with us until Dad had the car fixed and we were able to leave. We decided to not continue camping and instead drive a couple of hours to spend the last 2 days of the trip at the beach and stay in a hotel. A few days later, a deputy called my dad and told him they never did find the men. He said that it was most likely a crime of opportunity after seeing a woman with 2 girls in tow. He was sure they had been watching us from off the trail and had messed with our camp to judge how my dad would react. When my dad seemed to be too big of a threat, they sabotaged our car hoping to put us in a position where we were vulnerable. He said they would follow up with us if they find out anything else, but according to my dad, nothing ever came of it. Years later, I tried to do some research on crimes in that area of Oregon during the 80s that might have involved something like we experienced. All I could find was a few reports of campers being robbed and a few cars broken into. There was one case of a young lady and her dog going missing from an area near there, but it was never determined what had happened to her, or even if it was something bad or she just ran away. I can tell you that we did go back to that lake a few years later and had a very uneventful camping trip. It was nice to go back and find some joy in a spot that was special to me. I really hope those creepy guys never hurt anyone and maybe were caught for other crimes. I will never know though. I just hope to never run into a situation like that again. I can say that having a dog along with us helped our situation. She was the hero and kept us alert. Amber went on to live until she was 12 years old and passed with her favorite people around her. Remember to stay safe, stay watchful, and it never hurts to have a sweet brave dog with you. You know, Alex began, her eyes glancing around the dimly lit room. I've always had this weird feeling about this place. The room was filled with dusty furniture, the smell of age lingering heavily in the air. It was a stark contrast to the modern, minimalist house we had just left behind. The walls were adorned with peeling wallpaper, and the floorboards creaked with every step we took. The house had belonged to my great-grandparents, who had passed away years ago, leaving it untouched. It was a relic of the past, a silent sentinel of forgotten memories. As we ventured deeper into the house, the air grew colder and the shadows grew longer. Our laughter echoed through the empty corridors, bouncing off the walls like a desperate plea for company. The stale smell grew stronger, hinting at secrets long buried beneath the layers of dust. We had come to clean out the place, to prepare it for sale, but it felt more like we were disturbing something ancient and best left alone. It's just creepy, you know, Alex said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's like the house doesn't want us here. We had split up to cover more ground, and I found myself in a small, cluttered room that had probably been an office once. The windows were boarded up, leaving only a sliver of light to seep through the cracks. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their contents shrouded in a thick layer of dust. A heavy desk dominated the center, its drawers slightly ajar as if beckoning me to explore. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, sending a jolt of fear through my body. The sound was so loud, so final, that it seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. I whirled around, my hand on the knob, but it was stuck. Panic began to set in as I jiggled it frantically, trying to force it open. Alex, I called out, but my voice was muffled by the thick, oppressive silence that had enveloped the room. There was no response, only the distant echo of my own voice bouncing back at me. My heart raced as I stepped away from the door, my eyes scanning the room for any other way out. The shadows danced on the walls as the light from the hallway grew dimmer, and I could swear I heard the faintest rustle of pages from the bookshelves. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and an eerie feeling of being washed over me. The air grew colder, and the rustling grew louder, as if the books were whispering secrets to each other. The room felt alive, and yet utterly devoid of any comfort or warmth. I tried the door again, but it remained steadfast in its decision to keep me contained. The house groaned, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was the cold or the sudden realization that we had stumbled into something much more than just a dusty old house. As the silence stretched on, I began to doubt that this was a simple case of a stuck door. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the shadows grew more menacing. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Okay, I murmured to myself, okay, think. But my thoughts were interrupted by a faint, ghostly sound, a sound that seemed to come from the very fabric of the room. It was the sound of someone or something moving towards me. Slowly, deliberately, it grew closer until it was right beside me, so close that I could feel the warmth of its breath against my cheek. I spun around, expecting to see Alex playing a prank, but instead, I found myself face to face with a figure shrouded in darkness. The only thing visible was a pair of piercing eyes, staring at me with an intensity that seemed to bore into my soul. My heart was hammering in my chest as the figure stepped closer, the rustling of its clothing sounding like the hiss of a snake. I tried to scream, but the sound was caught in my throat, choking me with fear. The figure reached out a hand, and as it touched me, the room grew darker, colder. The air was thick with a malevolence that seemed to seep into my very bones. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. The room was once again bathed in the flickering light from the hallway, the shadows retreating to their corners. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my chest, gasping for air as if I had been underwater. The touch had been icy, leaving an unmistakable imprint of fear that lingered on my skin. I stared at the spot where the figure had been, my mind racing. What was that? A hallucination brought on by the oppressive atmosphere, or something more sinister? The door to the room was still closed, the knob unyielding. I had to get out, to find Alex and tell her what happened. My eyes fell on the desk, and I noticed a drawer that was slightly open, one that hadn't been before. With trembling hands, I pulled it out further. Inside, I found a dusty old journal. The leather was brittle and cracked, but the pages within were surprisingly intact. The handwriting was faded, but as I read the first few lines, the words sent a shiver down my spine. It spoke of a presence, a spirit that lingered within the house, trapped by some ancient curse. A spirit that grew stronger with each living soul that ventured into its domain. The entries grew more frantic as the days went on, detailing strange occurrences and eerie sounds that had plagued the writer's nights. It was my great-grandfather's journal. With a sense of dread, I turned to the last page. The final entry was a plea, a warning to never come to the house alone. The date was the day of his death, almost 50 years ago to the day. My blood ran cold. Was this what had happened to him? The rustling grew louder again, closer this time, and the figure was back, its eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to light up the room. I slammed the drawer shut, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. I had to get out, no. I threw my weight against the door, and with a final, desperate heave, it swung open. The hallway was empty, the rest of the house eerily quiet. Alex, I called out, my voice shaking. We have to get out of here. My footsteps pounded on the old floorboards as I sprinted through the corridors, the journal clutched tightly to my chest. The house felt alive with malicious intent, as if it were trying to keep us trapped within its cold embrace. As I reached the stairs, something caught my eye, a flicker of movement from the corner of my vision. I turned and saw the figure floating at the top of the staircase, blocking our escape. The eyes bored to me, and I could feel the temperature drop even further. Alex, I shouted again, my voice now a mix of fear and urgency. We can't go out that way. When it was too late, Alex's footsteps grew closer, and before she could see what I saw, she stepped into the hallway, her eyes going wide with terror as she took in the specter looming above us. The figure raised its arms, and a cold wind swept through the house, knocking us both off our feet. The air grew thick, and the shadows grew darker, closing in around us. We had disturbed something ancient and vengeful, and now it had its sights set on us. We were trapped, and there was nowhere to run. Our fate was sealed within the walls of the house that had borne silent witness to decades of pain and despair. We huddled together, our eyes locked on the figure as it began to descend the stairs. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anguished voices that seemed to fill the very air around us. The house was coming alive with the spirits it had held captive for so long. We had to find a way out, or become part of the house's eternal nightmare. I've always been a night owl. Something about the world being quiet and still at night makes me feel at ease. My apartment complex backs up to a small wooded area with a jogging path that loops around the neighborhood. Even though I knew better, I liked taking late night walks there to clear my head. It was around 11:30 p.m. on a Friday when I decided to head out. I had my earbuds in, listening to my usual true crime podcast. The path was dimly lit by a few sparse streetlights, but I'd walked it so many times I could practically do it blindfolded. About 5 minutes in, I noticed something strange. strange. There was a faint rustling noise coming from the trees to my left. I told myself it was probably a raccoon or maybe just the wind. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned off my podcast and scanned the area, but the woods were pitch black. I shrugged it off and kept walking. That's when I noticed him. About 20 feet ahead, standing just barely within the glow of a streetlight, was a man. He wasn't jogging or even walking. He was just standing there, completely still, facing me. I froze. He didn't move. I thought maybe he was looking at his phone or tying his shoe, but something about his posture felt wrong. I took a step forward, and he stepped back, retreating into the shadows. A chill ran down my spine. I decided to turn around and head home. As I walked back, I kept glancing over my shoulder. That's when I saw him again, this time much closer. He was following me. My heart was pounding. I started walking faster, and so did he. I could hear his footsteps echoing mine, deliberate and heavy. I was too far from my apartment to run for it, so I did the next best thing. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. I think someone's following me. I whispered, my voice shaking. Where are you? I gave her my location and tried to keep calm. The operator stayed on the line with me, asking questions to keep me talking. But then I made a mistake. I glanced back again. He wasn't there. For a split second, I felt relief until I saw a shadow move out of the corner of my eye. He had cut through the trees. It was now ahead of me, standing in the middle of the path, blocking my way. The operator must have heard my gasp because she asked, Ma'am, are you okay? I don't know what to do. I whispered, keep walking, stay on the line, and don't engage, she said. I moved to the far edge of the path, giving him as much space as possible. As I passed him, I could see his face clearly for the first time. His eyes were wide and unblinking, his mouth twisted into a grin that sent shivers down my spine. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, watching me. I broke into a run, not caring if it made me look scared. I didn't stop until I was back at my apartment complex. For weeks, I avoided the jogging path entirely. Every creak of my apartment floor or distant sound from the woods behind my building made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there. Then, one night, I made the mistake of thinking I'd put it all behind me. It was around 8 p.m., early enough that I figured it was safe. The path would still have people on it, right? I convinced myself I'd been overreacting about that night. Maybe the guy was just a weirdo messing with me. I grabbed my earbuds, but this time, I decided against the true crime podcast. I didn't need to make myself jumpy. Instead, I chose something upbeat and left my apartment. The path was quieter than I'd hoped, but the cool air and faint smell of pine were calming. I stuck to the main loop, avoiding the darker offshoot trails. Everything was fine until I rounded the corner near a cluster of picnic tables. That's when I saw it, a Polaroid picture pinned to one of the benches with a small rock. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up. It was a photo of me, from behind, taken the night I was followed. My stomach turned as I noticed a handwritten note scribbled on the back. You looked scared. I liked that. I dropped the photo and stumbled back, scanning the area. I felt exposed, like eyes were on me again. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my hands trembling. 911, what's your emergency? He's back. I stammered. He left a photo of me. The operator asked for my location, and I gave it to her while retreating to the nearest street light. I felt safer in the glow of the light, but couldn't shake the overwhelming paranoia. The police arrived within minutes, and I handed over the photo. The officer examined it and frowned. Where exactly did you find this? I pointed to the picnic table, but the officer's face hardened as he looked past me. There's another one, he said. I turned to see a second Polaroid pinned to a tree a few feet away. I didn't want to look at it, but the officer retrieved it. This one was of me standing at the streetlight moments earlier, phone in hand. It had just been taken. I felt my knees go weak. Sir, right now. The officers immediately called for backup and started searching the area. They instructed me to stay put by the squad car, but all I could do was scan the tree line, waiting for him to appear. After about an hour, the officers returned. They hadn't found anyone but assured me they'd continue patrolling the area. One of them walked me back to my apartment, where I locked every door and window. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt like a threat. I thought about moving, but money was tight, and breaking my lease wasn't an option. Then, a week later, I found a small envelope taped to my door. Inside was another Polaroid. This one was of me, asleep in my bed. I didn't call the police this time. I didn't pack a bag or even lock the door behind me. I just left. I drove to a friend's house 2 towns over and crashed on their couch. I didn't tell them the full story, just enough for them to let me stay. The next morning, I called my landlord, broke my lease, and moved out. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but to the man with the Polaroid camera, I hope you never find me again. Let's not meet, ever. It all started a few weeks ago when I decided to take a late night stroll to clear my head. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever happens. It's peaceful, almost too peaceful. The street lights were sparse but bright enough to give a sense of safety, and the air had that cool autumn crispness that made walking so enjoyable. I set out around 10 p.m, earbuds in, playlist queued. My usual route takes me around the block and down a short trail that cuts through a small patch of woods. I'd done it dozens of times without a second thought, but that night, something felt off. As I turned the corner onto the wooded trail, I caught the faint sound of footsteps behind me. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia. I mean, it's a public path, someone else could easily be out for a walk. But these footsteps weren't casual. They matched my pace, perfectly synchronized with each of my steps. When I sped up, they sped up. When I slowed down, they did too. I glanced over my shoulder, trying to look casual, but all I could see was darkness. My stomach twisted, and a chill ran down my spine. I told myself I was being ridiculous and kept walking, but my gut was screaming at me to turn around and go home. I decided to test it. I stopped abruptly and pretended to adjust my shoe. The footsteps behind me stopped too. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure whoever it was could hear it. I stood up and started walking again, faster this time. The footsteps resumed, quicker now, as if they were closing the distance. That's when I broke into a run. I'm not a runner, but adrenaline is a hell of a motivator. I tore down the path, my lungs burning and my ears straining for any sound behind me. I didn't dare look back. I burst out of the woods and onto the main road, where the streetlights seemed impossibly bright. Only then did I risk a glance back. The trail was empty. Whoever had been following me was gone, or maybe they'd never left the woods. I didn't stick around to find out. When I got home, I locked every door and window and double-checked them all twice. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it had all been in my head. Maybe it was just an overactive imagination or some harmless coincidence. But a few days later, I found something that changed everything. I was taking out the trash when I noticed something wedged under my doormat. It was a Polaroid photo, old and slightly crumpled. The picture was of me, taken from behind, walking on that same wooded trail. Scrawled on the bottom edge in smudged black ink were the words, "You're fast, but I'll catch you." I haven't gone for a walk since. I've installed cameras around my house and started carrying pepper spray. I'd like to think it's over, that whoever left that photo has moved on, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear footsteps outside my window. 2 nights ago, I woke up to a soft tapping sound. At first, I thought it was a branch brushing against the house, but as I became more awake, I realized it was deliberate. A slow, rhythmic tap coming from my bedroom window. My curtains were drawn, and for a moment, I debated just staying in bed and pretending I didn't hear it. But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I crept to the window and peeked through a small gap in the curtain. My breath caught in my throat. There, illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlight, was a figure standing just a few feet from my window. They were wearing a hoodie, the hood pulled up, obscuring their face. But what really terrified me was their hand, raised and tapping on the glass with a single finger. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, and grabbed my phone to call the police. When I looked back at the window, they were gone. The police arrived quickly, but of course, there was no sign of anyone. They assured me they'd patrol the area and advised me to stay vigilant. Yesterday morning, I found another Polaroid tucked under my windshield wiper. This one was taken from outside my house, looking directly into my living room window. The words this time read, "You looked scared." I like that. I've since packed a bag and am staying with a friend across town. My house feels like it's no longer mine, like it's been invaded by something. Someone, I don't know what they want or why they fixated on me, but one thing is clear, they're not going to stop. Last night at my friend's house, I woke up to a notification on my phone. The motion-activated camera I'd installed outside my house had picked something up. Hesitating, I opened the app and saw a live feed of my front porch. The same figure stood there, hood up, holding another Polaroid. This time, they weren't trying to hide their face. The hood was pushed back just enough to reveal a wide, unsettling grin. They held the photo up to the camera for a few seconds, then carefully placed it under the welcome mat and walked away. I couldn't make out all the details of the photo, but I saw enough to know it was taken through the window of my friend's house, of me sleeping on the couch. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I'm considering going to stay with family in another state, but deep down, I'm terrified that no matter where I go, they'll find me. If they could track me to my friend's house, what's stopping them from following me anywhere? This morning, as I was preparing to leave, I noticed something odd on the motion camera feed. The figure had returned, but this time they weren't alone. A second person, similarly dressed, stood with them. They didn't knock or leave another photo. Instead, they both stared directly into the camera for a solid 5 minutes. Then they turned and walked away without a sound. I've decided I can't stay here any longer. As I write this, I'm sitting in a motel room several towns over, but even here, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Every creak of the building or shuffle of feet in the hallway sends my heart racing. I've started receiving texts from an unknown number. Each message contains a single word word, forming a sentence over time. The latest one said, "You run, but we'll follow." Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the motel phone rang at 2 a.m. last night. The sound shattered the silence, and my hand shook as I picked it up. I didn't say anything, but a voice on the other end whispered, "You can't hide forever." This morning, I checked out of the motel and drove aimlessly, looking for anywhere that felt safe. I ended up at a rest stop miles away from any major town. I parked in the far corner, my car surrounded by tall trees. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. But as I sat there, trying to calm my racing mind, a car pulled into the lot and parked several spaces away. It was old and beat up, with tinted windows that hid the driver. My stomach churned as I watched the door slowly open. A man stepped out, wearing a hoodie just like the others. He didn't look in my direction, not at first, but then, as if sensing my gaze, he turned his head slowly and locked eyes with me. A smile spread across his face, cold, knowing, and completely devoid of any humanity. I threw my car into gear and sped out of the lot, tires screeching. In my rearview mirror, I saw him casually get back into his car, as if he knew exactly where I was going. My gas tank is nearly empty now, and I don't know how much farther I can go. If anyone reads this, please be careful. Sometimes, no matter how fast you run, you can't escape what's chasing you. To those strangers, and to whoever might be helping them, let's never meet. Ever. I've run out of gas, stranded on the side of an empty highway. It's eerily silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I've tried calling for help, but my phone battery is dead. I keep glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that beat up car pull up behind me. I don't know what to do. I feel trapped, paralyzed by the fear that any move I make might bring them closer. But staying here isn't an option either. The sun is setting, and I know I need to find somewhere safe before night falls. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The road stretches endlessly in both directions, flanked by dense trees. I decided to head toward a faint light I could see in the distance, hoping it's a house or a gas station. As I walk, the silence presses down on me, every snap of a twig or rustle in the bushes making my heart race. I keep turning around, convinced I'm being followed, but there's nothing there. At least, not that I can see. The light ahead grows brighter, and I realize it's coming from a small cabin. Relief washes over me as I quicken my pace, but the feeling doesn't last long. Something about the cabin feels wrong. The windows are dark, and there's no sign of movement inside, but the front door is slightly ajar, swaying gently in the breeze. I hesitate on the porch, debating whether to go in or keep walking. Before I can decide, a voice calls out from behind me. It's soft, almost playful, and sends a chill down my spine. "You've come so far," it says, "but I didn't think it would be this easy, did you?" I spin around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there's no one there, just the empty road and the dense woods beyond. The door to the cabin creaks open wider, and I feel a pull, like I'm being drawn inside against my will. I don't want to go in. Every instinct screams at me to turn and run, but my legs feel rooted to the spot. The last thing I see before stepping inside is a Polaroid taped to the doorframe. It's a picture of me, taken just moments ago, standing on this very porch. To whoever is out there, if you find this, don't look for me. Just run. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. It was just supposed to be a quick run to the convenience store down the street. I had forgotten to grab milk earlier in the day, and I figured a 5-minute trip couldn't hurt. It was around 9 p.m, dark but not unusually late, and I didn't feel any particular sense of unease as I walked out the door. The store was practically empty, save for the cashier and a man browsing the candy aisle. I grabbed the milk, paid quickly, and headed back out into the cool night air. The walk home was quiet. The streets in my neighborhood always seemed deserted after sundown. About halfway home, I started to notice a faint sound behind me. At first, I thought it might be my own footsteps echoing in the silence, but then I realized it didn't match my rhythm. Someone was following me. I turned my head slightly to glance over my shoulder. A man, maybe the same one from the store, was about 50 feet behind me. He wasn't running or trying to catch up, just walking at a steady pace, hands in his pockets, head slightly tilted down. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was a coincidence. He was probably just going the same way. I sped up slightly, hoping to create some distance, but when I glanced back again, he had quickened his pace too. My palms started to sweat as I picked up the pace even more. I wasn't far from my house now, just 3 blocks, but the sense of safety I usually felt in my neighborhood was nowhere to be found. I turned the corner onto my street and, without looking back, broke into a jog. My house came into view, and I reached into my pocket to grab my keys, fumbling as I ran up the driveway. My fingers finally found the right one, and I unlocked the door, slamming it shut behind me and throwing the deadbolt into place. I stood there for a moment, my back pressed against the door, breathing hard. I didn't hear footsteps anymore, but I wasn't convinced he was gone. I peeked out through the peephole, but the porch was empty. Maybe he had just kept walking, I thought, trying to calm my racing heart. That's when I heard it, a soft, deliberate knock on the door. I froze. I hadn't seen him approach. How could he be there now? Another knock, this one louder. My hand shook as I reached for my phone and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator, explaining that someone was outside my house, but before they could respond, I heard a voice through the door. Why did you run? It was low, almost calm, but something about it chilled me to the bone. I just wanted to talk. The operator's voice on the other end snapped me out of my panic, and I told them someone was trying to get into my house. They assured me officers were on the way, but those minutes felt like hours. The man knocked again, harder this time, and the doorknob rattled. My entire body was trembling. Then, suddenly, the knocking stopped. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear anything, but the night had gone eerily quiet. I stayed there, frozen, until I saw the red and blue lights of the patrol car flash through the windows. The police searched the area but didn't find anyone. They took my statement and promised to keep an eye on the neighborhood. For weeks after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside my window sent me into a panic. I've since moved to a new place and installed every security feature I could think of. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear a faint knock on the door, and it all comes flooding back. A few nights ago, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Groggy, I reached for it, thinking it was a spam call or notification. But when I looked at the screen, my blood ran cold. It was a video message from an unknown number. The video was only a few seconds long, but it showed my old house. The camera was shaky, as though held by someone walking up the driveway. The video ended abruptly, just as the person filming reached the front door. I called the police immediately, but there wasn't much they could do. My old house had new tenants now, and there was no proof the video was recent. They advised me to stay vigilant and contact them if anything else happened. Last night, it escalated. I woke up to find a single piece of paper slid under my apartment door. Written in bold, blocky letters was a message, "I found you." I spent the rest of the night barricaded in my room, clutching the phone in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. This morning, I contacted a security company to upgrade my system even further. Cameras, alarms, motion sensors, everything. I also reached out to a private investigator to see if they could track the person down. But no matter what steps I take, I can't shake the feeling that it's only a matter of time. To the man who refuses to leave me alone, let's not mate. Ever. Tonight, it happened again. This time, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My bedroom window. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and grabbed the knife from my nightstand. The sound of footsteps filled the apartment, deliberate and slow. Whoever it was wanted me to know they were there. I called the police again, whispering my address into the phone, but I knew it would take time for them to arrive. The footsteps got closer, stopping just outside my bedroom door. The knob turned slowly, and I pressed myself against the far wall, knife shaking in my hand. The door creaked open. A tall figure stood in the doorway, backlit by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their gaze. "Why do you keep running?" they asked, their voice calm and almost mocking. Before I could respond, the sound of sirens broke through the silence. The figure turned their head toward the window, then back at me. "We'll meet again," they said, slipping out of the apartment as quickly as they had entered. The police found no trace of them, just the shattered glass and muddy footprints leading away from the window. I don't know how they keep finding me or why they're so fixated on me, but I've made a decision. I'm leaving everything behind, my job, my apartment, even my name. I don't know where I'll go, but I can't stay here. To the person who has made my life a nightmare, let's not meet, ever. The stalker's background started coming to light after I hired a private investigator. At first, there wasn't much to go on, no clear identity, no photos, and nothing linking them to me. But then the investigator found something chilling. The man had been stalking someone else before me. A woman who lived 2 towns over had a nearly identical experience. Strange knocks on her door, messages left on her car, and even a break-in. The worst part, she vanished 6 months ago, and no one ever found her. The investigator discovered a possible name, Andrew, based on records of restraining orders filed against an unknown individual fitting his description. Andrew wasn't just stalking at random, he had a pattern. He chose people who lived alone, people whom he could isolate and terrorize. The last no restraining order was filed 3 years ago, and the woman who filed it also disappeared under mysterious circumstances. I can't stop wondering why he chose me. What about my life made him focus on me? Did I just happen to catch his eye at that convenience store, or has he been watching me for longer than I realize? The investigator also uncovered a disturbing piece of evidence, a small storage unit registered under a fake name but linked to Andrew. Inside were personal items from his previous victims, photos, letters, and in one case, a set of house keys. I felt sick when I learned this, wondering if my own belongings would have ended up in that unit had I not managed to keep running. The police are involved now, but there's no guarantee they'll catch him. He's careful, calculated, and knows how to disappear. For now, all I can do is keep moving, stay vigilant, and pray that he doesn't find me again. To Andrew, or whatever your real name is, let's never meet, because if we do, I might not survive. It was a sad evening, and I was on my way home from a friend's house. I don't usually walk home late at night, but I didn't live far, and the air was crisp and refreshing. My neighborhood is generally safe, so I didn't think twice about cutting through the park to save time. The park was almost empty, save for the occasional jogger or dog walker. The path was lit by dim streetlights, creating long shadows that stretched out across the trail. I had my headphones on, listening to a podcast, when I felt a strange, almost primal sense that I wasn't alone. I pulled one earbud out and glanced over my shoulder. A man, maybe in his 40s, was walking about 20 feet behind me. He had on a heavy coat and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Nothing about him screamed danger, but something felt off. I decided to keep walking, picking up my pace slightly, hoping he was just out for an evening stroll. But when I glanced back a minute later, he was still there, closer now, and his pace had matched mine. My heart started to race as I realized this wasn't a coincidence. I veered off the main path, heading toward a small side trail that led back to the street. It was darker there, but I figured it would bring me closer to the main road where I could find help if I needed it. The man followed. At this point, I was walking so fast it was almost a jog, my hand clutching my phone in my pocket. I turned my head quickly to look behind me, and that's when I saw it. He wasn't just walking anymore. He was running. Panic set in, and I took off at a full sprint. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like jelly as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. I could hear his footsteps pounding on the trail behind me, getting closer and closer. I burst out of the trail and onto the sidewalk, nearly colliding with a couple walking their dog. I gasped out, "Help, he's following me." The couple turned just in time to see the man stop abruptly, his face hidden in the shadows. He didn't say a word. He just stood there for a moment before turning around and disappearing back into the park. The couple walked me home, and I reported the incident to the police, but they couldn't do much with the vague description I gave them. For weeks after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards sent me into a panic. One morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. A Polaroid picture slipped under my door. It was a photo of me taken from outside my bedroom window. On the back, written in messy, jagged handwriting, were the words, "See you soon." I moved out of that apartment the very next day. For a while, I felt safe again. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a secured building with cameras and a front desk that monitored everyone who came in. I even changed my routines. No more late night walks or predictable routes home. But a sense of unease still lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake. A few months later, I received a package at work. It was strange because I hadn't ordered anything, and no one at the office mentioned sending me a gift. The package was plain, brown, and unmarked except for my name and the return address, which was blank. Curious but cautious, I opened it. Inside was a single item, a key. There was no note, no explanation, just an ordinary house key taped to a piece of cardboard. My stomach dropped as I stared at it, trying to make sense of what it meant. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining that someone, somewhere, was unlocking a door. My door. I checked and rechecked the locks, even pushing a chair under the handle for good measure. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The next morning, I took the key to a locksmith, hoping they could tell me something about it. They examined it briefly and said it looked like a generic copy, nothing special. But then, the locksmith said something that chilled me. This kind of key is usually made to fit old locks. You don't have an old lock at your place, do you? I shook my head, feeling sick. If it wasn't for my apartment, then what was it for? 2 nights later, I got my answer. I woke up to the sound of metal scraping against metal. It was faint at first, but then it became clear someone was trying to unlock my door. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. The security system hadn't triggered, which meant whoever it was had a key. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. There he was, the man from the park, the one I thought I'd escaped. He was hunched over, fiddling with the lock, his face partially obscured by the brim of his baseball cap. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator what was happening. They told me to stay quiet and wait for the police to arrive. I clutched the phone tightly, my eyes never leaving the peephole. The man seemed to sense something because he stopped, looked directly at the door, and then at the peephole as if he knew I was watching. A smile spread across his face. He raised his hand and pressed something against the peephole, a Polaroid photo. I couldn't see what was on it, but the gesture was enough to paralyze me with fear. The sound of sirens finally broke the tension. He turned and walked away calmly, disappearing down the hallway just as the police arrived. They searched the area but found no sign of him. When they retrieved the photo from the door, I felt my knees give out. It was a picture of me asleep in my bed, taken from inside my apartment. I've moved again since then, but I'm haunted by the idea that he's still out there, watching, waiting. Last week, I received another package. This time, it wasn't left at work. It was on the doorstep of my new apartment. The package contained a small notebook. Its pages were filled with messy, erratic handwriting, detailing moments of my life that only someone watching me would know. Times I left for work, what I wore, conversations I had on the phone. There were even sketches of me, crude but unmistakable. The final page had a single message scrawled across it: "You can't run forever." I've reported everything to the police, but there's still no trace of him. I'm preparing to move again, further this time, to a place where I hope he can't follow. But deep down, I know he'll find me. He always does. Last night, as I was packing my things, I heard a knock at the door. This time, it wasn't the deliberate, eerie knocking he'd done before. It was frantic, loud, and desperate. My stomach turned as I crept toward the door, knife in hand, and peeked through the peephole. It wasn't him. It was a young woman, her face pale and streaked with tears. She kept glancing over her shoulder, clearly terrified. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock in place. "Please," she whispered. "He's after me too." My blood ran cold. Before I could respond, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. Her eyes widened in terror, and she screamed, "He's here." I slammed the door shut and locked it, backing away as fast as I could. Through the peephole, I saw the man step into view, his baseball cap casting a shadow over his face. He looked at the woman, then at my door, and smiled. The woman's screams echoed down the hallway as he grabbed her, dragging her out of sight. I wanted to help, but fear rooted me to the spot. By the time the police arrived, there was no sign of either of them, just a single Polaroid left on the floor outside my door. It was a picture of me, taken through the peephole, with the words "next time" scrawled across the bottom. I knew I couldn't keep running. He'd always find me. But this time, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to be his victim anymore. I contacted a private investigator, someone experienced with cases like mine. Together, we devised a plan to trace him. I upgraded every piece of technology I owned: hidden cameras, motion detectors, even a GPS tracker. Every time I moved, I left behind bait, small clues to see if he'd take the trail. And he did. It took months, but eventually, we found the first solid lead: a storage unit registered under a fake name. Inside, we discovered a trove of horrifying trophies, photos, personal items from his victims, and detailed plans for what he'd intended to do to me. Among the items was a list of names, and mine wasn't the only one with next written beside it. The police have taken over now, but I'm still looking over my shoulder, waiting for the moment he returns. He's been one step ahead of me for so long, and I know this isn't over. To the man who's haunted my every move, let's not meet. But if we do, I won't be the one running. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. I've always considered myself a pretty cautious person. I lock my doors religiously, triple check my car when I leave it, and never let strangers too close. But none of that prepared me for what happened last fall. It started with something small, a note left on my car. I parked in my usual spot at the apartment complex, and when I got back from work, there was a folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. It read, "You're beautiful when you're focused. Can't wait to see you again." I thought it was weird, but brushed it off as a one-off creepy gesture. Maybe it was a prank or someone mistaking my car for someone else's. I threw the note away and didn't give it much thought. A week later, I found another note. This one wasn't playful, it was chilling. "I saw you in the red sweater today. You look even better up close." My stomach dropped. I'd worn a red sweater to work that day. Someone was watching me. I reported it to the apartment management, but they said there wasn't much they could do without proof. They offered to review the parking lot cameras, but they didn't find anything unusual. I felt trapped, exposed in my own home. Things escalated quickly after that. I started noticing small signs that someone had been near my apartment. A smudge on my window, a faint scratch on the lock. One night, I came home to find my patio chair moved directly under my bedroom window. That was the night I called the police. They took my report seriously and increased patrols in the area, but there wasn't much else they could do. The officers told me to keep my doors locked, be vigilant, and call if anything suspicious happened again. The real terror came about 2 weeks later. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of creaking wood. At first, I thought it was the usual noises of the old old building, but then I heard it again, closer. Someone was inside. My heart raced as I reached for my phone. I tried to stay quiet, hoping whoever it was wouldn't come near my bedroom. I could hear slow, deliberate footsteps moving through my living room. My bedroom door didn't have a lock, and I realized I was utterly vulnerable. I called 911, whispering to the dispatcher that someone was in my apartment. They assured me officers were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. The footsteps stopped, and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't try to open the door. Then I heard a voice, low and calm, on the other side of the door. "Why are you hiding?" "I just want to talk." I thought I was going to pass out from sheer terror. My hand shook as I held the phone, whispering to the dispatcher that the person was right outside my room. I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, and then, mercifully, the footsteps retreated. By the time the police arrived, the intruder was gone. They found the front door lock had been picked and footprints leading away from my patio. The officer told me the person likely fled when they heard the sirens. I moved out the very next day, packed what I could fit in my car and left town, staying with friends until I could find a new place. It's been months now, and I've done everything I can to protect myself. New locks, cameras, alarms, you name it. But the fear followed me. 2 nights ago, I was settling into bed when I heard a noise outside my window. My new apartment is on the 2nd floor, and I'd always felt safer knowing no one could reach it easily. But when I pulled back the curtain, my blood ran cold. A ladder was propped against the wall, leading straight to my window. At the top, a man stood staring at me through the glass. It was him. I screamed and scrambled for my phone, dialing 911 as fast as my fingers could move. The man didn't flinch. He stayed there, watching, as if daring me to do something. Then, as the operator answered, he climbed back down the ladder and disappeared into the night. The police arrived quickly and searched the area, but once again, he was gone. They found the ladder abandoned in the bushes below and told me they'd increase patrols, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't think they'd catch him. Last night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up with every light in the apartment turned on, clutching a kitchen knife and jumping at every sound. Around 3 a.m., I heard a faint tapping at the front door. My breath caught in my throat as I crept toward it, knife in hand. Through the peephole, I saw nothing, just the empty hallway. But when I opened the door, I found another note taped at eye level. This one didn't have words, just a single Polaroid picture of me taken through my bedroom window. In the photo, I was asleep. I don't know what to do anymore. He's found me twice now, and I know it's only a matter of time before he tries something worse. The next morning, I decided to take drastic action. I contacted a security expert and explained everything. They outfitted my apartment with additional locks, reinforced windows, and a state-of-the-art surveillance system. It gave me a temporary sense of control, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't stop him. He was always one step ahead. 2 days later, the system picked up movement outside my apartment. At 2 a.m., I checked the live feed on my phone and froze. He was there, standing in the middle of the parking lot, staring directly at my camera. He didn't try to hide or run. He just stood there, holding up a sign that read, "You can't hide forever." I called the police again, my voice shaking as I explained what was happening. This time, they arrived in record time, and when they reached the parking lot, he was gone, but they found the sign left propped against my car. The officer in charge looked at me with genuine concern and said, "This isn't random. He's fixated on you." I knew then that movie wasn't enough. I needed to disappear entirely. I packed what I could, quit my job, and left the city that same night. I've changed my name, deleted my social media, and moved to a rural area where no one knows me. Months have passed, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I've started to relax. My new town is small, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and I've avoided forming any close connections to keep my past a secret. Life has settled into a quiet routine, and I've started to believe I might finally be safe. But last night, that fragile sense of security shattered. I was walking back to my cabin from the general store, the woods around me alive with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. The path is long and dimly lit, but I've taken it dozens of times without issue. As I neared the edge of the forest, I noticed something odd, a faint glow coming from my cabin's window. I distinctly remember turning off all the lights before leaving. My stomach dropped. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I strained to listen. The woods were too quiet now, no crickets, no wind, just an oppressive silence. Summoning my courage, I crept closer, my phone gripped tightly in my hand, ready to call for help. When I reached the window, I peered inside. The glow was coming from a single candle placed on the dining table. Next to it was an envelope with my name scrawled across the front in messy, familiar handwriting. He had found me. I didn't go inside. I ran back to the store, my heart pounding, and called the police. By the time they arrived, the candle had burned out, and the envelope was gone. There was no sign of him, no sign he'd ever been there, but I know what I saw. The officers assured me they'd patrol the area, but their words felt hollow. He's out there, watching, waiting, and this time, I don't think he plans to leave empty-handed. This morning, I found another Polaroid. It was tucked under my cabin door, just like the others, but this time, it wasn't of me sleeping. It was a picture of me standing in the woods last night, staring staring back at the cabin. Written below it, in the same messy handwriting, was a single word, run. The mystery deepened later that afternoon. While packing my things to leave the cabin for good, I found something else slipped under the doormat, a small USB drive. Against my better judgment, I plugged it into my laptop. On it were dozens of files, photos of me, journal entries written as if from my perspective, and a document titled Phase 2. The file contained detailed plans for my every move, from fleeing the cabin to potential hideouts I'd consider next. It even included conversations I'd had with locals, suggesting someone had been eavesdropping. One file stood out, a video. When I clicked on it, my blood turned to ice. It was footage of me, filmed from just inside the tree line near the cabin. The video ended abruptly, but before it cut out, I saw something chilling. A figure was crouched in the background, wearing my red sweater from that first note. To the man who has turned my life into a waking nightmare, let's not meet, ever. It happened when I was 22, during my last year of college. I was living off campus in a small, run-down apartment complex just a few blocks from the university. Rent was cheap, and the neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, in hindsight. One evening, I decided to stay in and binge watch a new TV series. My roommate was out for the weekend, visiting her family, so I had the apartment to myself. Around 10 p.m., I realized I'd run out of snacks, so I threw on a hoodie and walked to the corner store a block away. The air was crisp, and the streets were deserted, save for a few parked cars and the distant hum of traffic. As I was walking back, I got the distinct feeling I was being watched. You know, that prickly sensation on the back of your neck. I glanced over my shoulder but didn't see anyone. Shrugging it off as paranoia, I quickened my pace and made it back to my apartment. That's when I saw it. The blinds to my living room window, which I always kept closed, were slightly parted, just enough for someone to peek through. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was probably the wind or a loose string. Still, I locked the door behind me and checked all the windows. Everything seemed normal. An hour later, I was curled up on the couch when I heard a faint knock on the door. Not a hard knock, just a soft, deliberate tap tap tap. My stomach twisted. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Who is it? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. I grabbed my phone and crept to the peephole. The hallway light flickered, casting eerie shadows, but no one was there. I stood there for a moment, frozen, before deciding to double check the locks. Everything was secure. Then I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a knock, it was the sound of someone jiggling the doorknob. My blood ran cold. I called 911 and whispered to the operator that someone was trying to get into my apartment. They told me to stay on the line and remain quiet. As I backed away from the door, I heard a voice, a low, almost sing-song tone. Why are you hiding? I just want to talk. I couldn't breathe. The operator assured me police were on their way, but it felt like an eternity. The jiggling stopped, and the voice grew more insistent. Come on, don't be rude. Finally, red and blue lights lit up the window, and I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The police banged on the door, shouting, "This is the police. Open up." I unlocked the door and flung it open, shaking, but the hallway was empty. The officers searched the building but didn't find anyone. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak and shadow felt like a threat. The next morning, I noticed something chilling scratched into the wood of my front door. Barely visible were the words, "I'll be back." I moved out of that apartment 2 weeks later, breaking my lease and staying with friends until I could find a new place. But it didn't stop there. 2 months after moving into my new place, I found a note taped to my car windshield. It was eerily familiar, written in the same handwriting, "Nice to see you again." My stomach sank as I realized whoever it was had found me again. This time, I called the police immediately. They took the note as evidence and told me they'd increased patrols in the area. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, I installed cameras around my apartment. I set up motion alerts on my phone and spent the evening glued to the screen, waiting for any sign of movement. Just after midnight, the motion alert went off. My heart pounded as I opened the live feed. There, on the camera facing my front door, was a shadowy figure standing perfectly still. They didn't knock or try the doorknob this time. They just stood there, staring directly into the camera. After a few minutes, they walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The police came again but found nothing. They suggested I stay with someone for a while, but I was too scared to even leave the apartment. For the next week, I barely slept, jumping at every sound and compulsively checking the cameras. Then, one morning, I woke up to find another note slipped under my door. This one was different. It wasn't a threat. It was a single Polaroid photo of me, taken through my bedroom window while I was sleeping. The discovery shook me, but the nightmare didn't end there. 2 nights later, the motion camera sent another alert. This time, it wasn't the front door. The alert came from my bedroom window. When I opened the feed, I saw a hand pressed against the glass, pale and still, as if waiting for a reaction. A moment later, the hand disappeared into the darkness. I stayed frozen, too terrified to move. I didn't sleep that night, and and the next morning I packed my bags and left. I couldn't stay there anymore. I moved to a new city somewhere far away and started fresh. I told myself I'd done everything right this time. I used a fake name on the lease, didn't share my address with anyone I didn't trust, and avoided any patterns that could make me predictable. For a while, it worked. I felt safe again. But then, last week, I found a package on my doorstep. There was no return address. Inside was a single item, a Polaroid camera. Attached to it was a note, written in the same familiar handwriting. It read, "Let's make some new memories." A part of me wanted to destroy the camera, to toss it in the trash and pretend it never existed. But curiosity got the better of me. I loaded the film it came with and took a picture of the empty room, just to see if it worked. The photo developed quickly, and when I looked at it, my blood ran cold. The room wasn't empty. Standing in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. Their face was obscured, but I knew it was them. Somehow, they had already found their way inside. I left the camera and the photo behind as I fled the apartment that night. I drove for hours, stopping only when exhaustion forced me to pull into a motel. I'm still here, too afraid to go back, too afraid to stay in one place for long. To the person who refuses to let me go, let's not meet. I've always been a night owl, enjoying the eerie quiet that comes with the small hours of the morning. Living in a small town surrounded by dense woods, the silence at night is almost deafening, but oddly comforting, or at least it used to be. It started last fall. I had just moved into a little house on the edge of town, the kind of place where the nearest neighbor is a good 10-minute drive away. It was a dream come true for someone like me who cherished solitude. My closest company was the forest that stretched endlessly behind my property. One particular night, around 2 a.m., I was sitting on my back porch, bundled in a blanket, sipping tea, and stargazing. The forest was pitch black, except for the faint outline of trees against the moonlit sky. The usual hum of crickets filled the air, and I could hear the occasional rustle of nocturnal critters in the underbrush. Then it stopped. Everything, the crickets, the rustling, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It was as if the world had paused, leaving only an oppressive, unnatural silence. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. I told myself it was probably just a predator nearby, a fox or maybe a coyote. But then, from the edge of the woods, I heard it. A faint, high-pitched whistling, like someone trying to mimic a bird but failing miserably. The sound repeated, each whistle longer and more strained than the last. I'm not sure why, but the sound unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. I've always been familiar with the noises of the forest, but this was different. It felt deliberate, like someone or something was trying to get my attention. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at the tree line. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the first few rows of trees. Nothing, just shadows and bark. But the whistling continued, growing closer. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound brave. There was no response, just the persistent, haunting whistle. I backed up toward the door, my flashlight still trained on the woods. That's when I saw it. A figure, just barely visible between the trees, standing impossibly still. It was tall, its limbs long and thin, and its head tilted at an unnatural angle. My heart dropped into my stomach. I froze, unsure whether to run or stay. The figure didn't move, but the whistling, it grew louder, sharper, as if it were right beside me now. I panicked, bolting inside and locking the door behind me. I peered through the window, my hands shaking as I tried to catch my breath. The figure was gone. The whistling had stopped, but the oppressive silence lingered. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I ventured into the woods, searching for any signs that someone or something had been there. I found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to suggest I hadn't just imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I saw. For weeks, I refused to go outside at night. I kept my curtains drawn and made sure every door and window was locked. The whistling didn't return, and I started convincing myself it had been some kind of waking nightmare. Until last night, I was in bed, the house dark and quiet, when I heard it again. The same strained, haunting whistle, this time coming from right outside my window. My blood ran cold as I realized it wasn't coming from the woods anymore. It was in my backyard. I didn't dare look. I stayed under my covers, clutching my phone and dialing 911. I whispered to the operator about someone being on my property. They assured me an officer was on the way. The whistling continued, moving slowly around the house as if circling me. Then came the tapping, light, deliberate taps on the glass, moving from window to window. I thought I might lose my mind. When the police arrived, the noises stopped. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. They assured me it was probably an animal and left, but I knew better. Tonight, I'm writing this with every light in the house on, and I can't stop shaking. I don't know who or what is out there, but I've made up my mind. I'm leaving this house, this town, and these woods behind. Whomever or whatever whatever you are, let's not meet, ever. It's been a few weeks since I left. I'm staying with a friend in a different town, far from the woods. For the first time in what feels like forever, I've been sleeping through the night, but something happened yesterday that's making me question everything. I went to the grocery store to pick up a few things. As I walked back to my car, I heard the same strained, haunting whistle. My heart raced, and I turned quickly, scanning the parking lot. It was crowded, full of people going about their day, but none of them seemed to notice the sound. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, someone's ringtone or a bird nearby, but then I saw it, standing by the edge of the lot, partially obscured by a row of cars. The same figure, tall and unnaturally still, its head tilted at that unsettling angle. It was watching me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I jumped into my car and sped away, my hands trembling on the wheel. I don't know how it found me or what it wants, but I'm terrified it won't stop. To whoever reads this, if you ever hear that whistle, run. I'm trying to keep calm, but last night pushed me over the edge. After speeding away from the grocery store, I made it back to my friend's house, double checking every lock before collapsing onto the couch. I hoped it wouldn't follow me there. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whistling outside the living room window. The same chilling, strained melody, only this time, it wasn't alone. I heard faint laughter, low and guttural, as if multiple voices were trying to stifle their amusement. My blood turned to ice. My friend, startled by my panicked shaking, got up and looked out the window despite my frantic pleas for her to stay away. She froze, her face pale. "What is that?" she whispered. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. Standing in the driveway were not one, but 3 figures, all unnaturally tall, their heads tilted in unison. Their limbs hung at awkward angles, as though they didn't fully understand how to use their bodies. They swayed slightly, like trees in a gentle breeze, and the whistling grew louder, harmonizing with the eerie laughter. "Wait till live. Now," I whispered, grabbing my friend's arm. But before we could move, the figures suddenly stopped swaying and turned their heads toward the front door, as if they knew we were about to run. The next moments were a blur. My friend and I bolted out the back door, jumped into her car, and drove as far and fast as we could. We didn't stop until the sun rose, pulling into a busy diner several towns away. I've since checked into a motel under a fake name, and I've been scanning every room, every corner, every shadow. The whistling hasn't followed me yet, but I can't shake the feeling that it's only a matter of time. If you're reading this, heed my warning. It doesn't stop, it doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. Whatever you do, if you hear the whistle, don't look for the source. Don't investigate, just run and pray it doesn't catch you. This will probably be my last update. I've been running for weeks now, moving from motel to motel, trying to stay ahead of whatever this is. I thought I had outsmarted it, but last night proved me wrong. I was driving along a deserted highway late at night, desperate to put more distance between myself and the last place I stayed. The road stretched endlessly before me, the darkness pressing in from all sides. My headlights were the only source of light, cutting through the void. Then, in the distance, I saw the 3 figures standing in the middle of the road, their silhouettes unmistakable. Their heads were tilted, and even from far away, I could hear it, that same curse whistling. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop. My heart pounded as I sat frozen, gripping the wheel. The figures didn't move. They just stood there, swaying slightly as if waiting for me to make the next move. I threw the car into reverse, my eyes locked on them as I backed away. The whistling grew louder, more piercing, filling the car and making my head throb. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned the wheel sharply, veering off the road and into the ditch. The car jolted violently, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. When I looked back, the figures were gone. The whistling had stopped, but I knew better than to think it was over. I'm writing this from an old, abandoned cabin I found deep in the woods. It's far from the highway, far from any town. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could lose them here. But as I sit here in the dark, the only sound is the faint, haunting whistle drifting through the trees. If you're reading this, please don't let my story become yours. If you ever hear that whistle, don't run to safety, run to somewhere it can't follow, and pray you find it before it finds you. It was the summer before my sophomore year of college, and I had just moved into my first off-campus apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small one-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. My parents had helped me move in, and though they seemed hesitant about the location, I reassured them that it was perfect for me. Cheap rent and a short commute to campus. What could go wrong? The first few weeks were uneventful. I spent my time unpacking, getting settled, and exploring the area. The neighborhood was mostly older couples and families, with the exception of one house directly across across the street. It was an old, two-story Victorian that looked like it hadn't been maintained in decades. The paint was peeling, the windows were grimy, and the overgrown yard seemed to swallow the house whole. I never saw anyone come or go, and I assumed it was abandoned. Then one night, something happened that I still can't explain. It was around midnight, and I was sitting on my couch watching TV. The living room blinds were open, letting in the faint glow of a street lamp outside. I wasn't paying much attention to the show when a movement across the street caught my eye. I glanced out the window and froze. The porch light of the old Victorian house was on. It was the first time I'd ever seen it illuminated, and it made the house look even eerier. I couldn't see anyone outside, but the fact that the light was on gave me an uneasy feeling. I closed the blinds, deciding it wasn't my business, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and peeked outside. The porch light was off, but something was different. A single rocking chair had been placed on the porch, its back facing the street. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before, but I shrugged it off. Maybe someone was fixing the place up. That night, I stayed up late again, working on an essay for class. Around 2 a.m., I went to the kitchen to grab a snack. As I passed the window, curiosity got the best of me, and I peeked out at the house across the street. The rocking chair was facing my apartment. I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't just turned in my direction, it was tilted slightly, like someone had just gotten up from it. But there was no one in sight. The porch light was off, and the house looked as dead as ever. I closed the blinds tightly and tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The next few days were quiet. I avoided looking at the house as much as possible, and I told myself I was just overthinking things. But one night, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was past midnight, and I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. My apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Then, faintly, I heard a creaking sound. It was rhythmic, like wood groaning under weight. It took me a moment to realize what it was. The rocking chair. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed, straining to listen. The creaking continued, steady and deliberate. It sounded like it was coming from right outside. I mustered up every ounce of courage I had, crept to the window, and peeked through the blinds. The rocking chair was now on my porch. It was empty, swaying back and forth on its own. I slammed the blinds shut and called the police. When they arrived, the chair was gone, and there was no sign of anyone outside. They assured me it was probably some prank by kids in the neighborhood, but I knew better. I didn't sleep that night, and by morning, I made up my mind to break my lease and move out. After breaking my lease, I found a sublet closer to campus. The new place was smaller but safer, with neighbors nearby and no eerie houses in sight. For a while, I felt like I could breathe again. The rocking chair, the strange creaking noises, and that awful feeling of being watched started to fade into a bad memory. But as much as I tried to move on, the uneasiness lingered in the back of my mind. Every creak of the new apartment's floors, every shadow cast by passing cars, it all set me on edge. I told myself it was just the lingering effects of stress and paranoia. I mean, what else could it be? Then the letters started. The first one appeared about a week after I moved in. I found it tucked under my apartment door when I got home from class. It was a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 words scrawled in uneven handwriting. This be yet. I felt my stomach drop. The handwriting was jagged and erratic, almost like it had been scratched into the paper. I tried to tell myself it was some sort of mistake or a prank, but deep down, I knew. I threw the letter away, locked every window and door, and tried to convince myself I was safe. The second letter came 2 days later. This time, it was slipped into my mailbox. The envelope was identical to the first, but the note inside was worse. It read, "I'm closer than you think. Panic sudden." I called the police again, but there wasn't much they could do. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. The officer suggested it might be an ex-boyfriend or someone I knew trying to scare me. But I didn't have an ex, and the only person I could think of was, no, that house, that chair, it wasn't possible. Was it? The third letter came that weekend, and it broke me. It wasn't just a letter this time. Along with the note, which simply said, "Look outside," there was a Polaroid photo. The picture showed my new apartment building, taken from across the street. In the foreground, barely visible, was a rocking chair. My hands trembled as I dropped the photo, my mind racing. I hadn't seen any rocking chairs outside. Whoever said this was toying with me. I called the police again, and this time they took me seriously. A patrol car stayed outside my building for the next 2 nights, but nothing happened. No new letters, no strange noises. I started to think maybe whoever it was had finally backed off. Then, on the 3rd night, I heard it again. The creaking. It was faint at first, barely audible over the hum of my apartment's heater, but it grew louder, more deliberate. I froze, sitting on the edge of my bed, too terrified to move. Slowly, I turned toward the window. My curtains were closed, but I could see the faint outline of something moving back and forth outside. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me to stay where I was, to ignore it, to hope it would go away. But I couldn't. I crept to the window, my heart pounding in my chest, and pulled back the curtain just an inch. There it was, the rocking rocking chair right outside my window swayed in the windless night, and in it sat a figure, tall, thin, and impossibly still. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and though its face was obscured by shadows, I could feel its gaze locked on me. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp in my panic. The noise must have startled it, because when I dared to look again, the chair was empty, but the creaking continued, louder now, echoing through the night like a taunt. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the chair was gone, and the police found no sign of anyone outside. They suggested I stay with someone for a few days, but I didn't have anyone close enough. I packed a bag and checked into a motel on the other side of town, but it didn't matter. The rocking chair followed me. Last night, I woke up to the sound of creaking outside my motel window. I didn't even look this time. I grabbed my bag and drove until the sun came up, stopping at a diner to catch my breath. As I sat in the parking lot, trying to calm myself, I glanced in my rearview mirror. It was there, on the roof of the diner, silhouetted against the morning light. The rocking chair, swaying gently with that same figure sitting in it, watching me. I'm writing this from a rest stop somewhere off the interstate. I don't know where I'm going, but I can't stop. It's always there, always watching, always waiting. If you ever see a rocking chair where it doesn't belong, don't look closer. Don't investigate. Just run and pray it doesn't follow you too. It's been 2 days since I last stopped. I've been driving almost non-stop, only pulling over for gas and coffee. My body is exhausted, my mind fraying at the edges, but I can't risk stopping for too long. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the creaking. Every time I glance in my mirror, I'm terrified I'll see it again. Last night, I thought I've lost it. I hadn't seen the chair or the figure since leaving the diner, and for the first time in days, I felt a sliver of hope. But as I drove through a desolate stretch of highway, my headlights caught something ahead. My stomach dropped. The rocking chair was in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching as I came to a stop just feet away from it. My hands trembled on the wheel as I stared at it, illuminated by my headlights. The chair was empty, but it swayed gently as if someone had just stood up. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I swerved around it and sped off, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw it. The figure standing beside the chair, its head tilted, its gaze following me as I drove away. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It's relentless, unyielding. No matter how far I run, it finds me. I've considered going to the police again, but what could they do? How do you fight something like this? If you're reading this, please take my warning seriously. If you ever hear the creaking of a rocking chair where it doesn't belong, leave. Don't look back. Don't try to understand it. Just go and pray it doesn't choose you next. I'm not one to scare easily. I've spent most of my life in big cities, walking home late at night, headphones in, and barely batting an eye when someone crosses my path. But this this was different. This wasn't just a moment of fear. It was the kind of terror that leaves a mark on you, like a stain you can't scrub off. It happened last winter. I just moved to a small town for work. You know, one of those places where everybody seems to know everybody. I thought the quiet life would be a nice change, a chance to slow down. My new apartment was just on the outskirts of town, at the end of a long, lonely road surrounded by woods. It was charming during the day, but at night, let's just say it got ominous. One night, I was coming home late after grabbing drinks with a coworker. Snow had started to fall, thick and heavy, blanketing the world in a smothering silence. My car's headlights barely cut through the dark as I turned onto the road leading to my place. The trees stood like dark sentinels on either side, their branches reaching out as if to swallow the light. As I rounded a bend, I saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was just some idiot hitchhiker or maybe someone whose car had broken down. But as I got closer, something felt off. They were wearing a long coat, and their head was tilted to one side in a way that looked unnatural. I slowed down, rolling to a stop about 10 feet away. "Hey, okay," I called out, rolling down my window just a crack. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. They didn't respond. They just stood there, heads still cocked, hands hanging limply at their sides. The snow was piling up on their shoulders and head, like they'd been standing there for a while. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down my spine. "Look, I can call someone for you." I tried again, but my voice wavered. Still no response. I don't know what made me do it, but I flicked on my high beams. That's when I saw it. Their face ... It wasn't right. The skin was pale, almost translucent, and their eyes. God, their eyes were pitch black, like bottomless pits. And then they smiled, a wide, jagged grin that stretched far too much, as if their face might split in half. I slammed the car into reverse, tires skidding on the icy road as I backed away. The figure didn't move. They just kept smiling, that awful too-wide smile. When I'd put enough distance between us, I turned the car around and floored it back to town. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, that smile. I called in sick the next day and started looking for a new place to live. A week later, I was gone, leaving most of my stuff behind because I couldn't bear to go back to that road. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank, some weirdo trying to scare people, but deep down, I know better. That thing, whatever it was, wasn't human. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to pick up. He was the landlord of my old apartment. He sounded shaken. Listen, he started, his voice trembling. I know you're gone, but we found something in the woods near your place. The coat, torn to shreds, covered in blood. It matches the description of the one you reported seeing. My stomach turned to ice. Did you find anything else? There was a long pause. No, but here's the thing. Some of the neighbors say they've seen someone wandering the road at night. Same figure, same coat. I hung up before he could say more. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that Libby wasn't enough, that somehow, someway, it's still watching me. Waited. 3 months passed. I'd moved into a new apartment in the city, far away from the town and that cursed road. Life was getting back to normal, or so I thought. Then, one night, I heard it. A knock at my door. It was soft, almost tentative, but it echoed through my apartment like a gunshot. My heart stopped. No one was supposed to be here. I didn't know anyone in this building well enough to expect a late night visit. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. At first, I saw nothing but the dimly lit hallway. Then, slowly, a shadow moved into view. My blood ran cold. It was the coat. Torn, stained, unmistakable, and beneath it, that face, pale, grinning, those bottomless black eyes staring directly into the peephole. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The knocking started again, louder this time, more insistent. My mind raced. Call the police. Run it. What if it could get in? What if it already had? The knocking stopped, replaced by a scratching sound, like nails dragging across the wood. And then a voice, low, guttural, barely above a whisper. You can't run forever. I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed my phone and bolted for the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, but the line wouldn't connect. Just static. The scratching grew louder, closer. I pressed myself against the far wall, heart hammering in my chest, tears streaming down my face. And then, nothing. Silence. It felt like hours before I worked up the courage to crack the door open and peek into the hallway. Empty. The front door was closed, the lock still in place. No sign of anyone or anything. I don't know what that thing is, why it followed me, or what it wants. All I know is, it's not over. It's never over. Weeks went by without incident, and I started to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, it was over. I tried to get back to normal, going about my routine and forcing myself to believe the thing was gone. Then, last night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Half asleep, I grabbed it, expecting some spam call, but the screen didn't show a number. It simply said, unknown caller. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. At first, there was nothing but static, faint and crackling. Then, that voice, low, guttural, and drippy with malice. You can't run forever. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The line went dead, leaving me sitting there in the dark, clutching the phone like a lifeline. And then, from somewhere in the apartment, I heard the floor creak. I stayed perfectly still, straining to hear anything else. The silence was deafening, but I knew better than to assume I was alone. My chest tightened as I clutched my phone, debating my next move. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, but my legs felt like lead. Another creak, closer this time. It came from the hallway outside my bedroom. My breathing hitched, and I slowly slid off the bed, crouching down as quietly as I could. The door to my bedroom was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see the faintest sliver of shadow moving past. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I crawled toward the closet, each movement deliberate and slow. I opened the door just enough to slip inside, curling up behind the hanging clothes. I dialed 911 again, praying for a connection, but all I got was that same static. Suddenly, the bedroom door creaked open. I could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving across the room. Tears streamed down my face as I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to stifle my ragged breathing. The footsteps stopped right in front of the closet. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and I swore I could feel it, that thing just inches away. Then, the silence was shattered by a low, guttural laugh. It wasn't human. It was deep, resonant, and filled with a malice that chilled me to my core. Found you, it whispered. The closet door was yanked open, and all I could see was that face, grinning, pale, and those endless black eyes staring into mine. I screamed, a sound ripped from the depths of my soul, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the middle of the woods, lying in the snow. My phone was gone, and my clothes were soaked through. The sun was rising, casting an eerie light over the trees. I staggered to my feet, disoriented and freezing, and stumbled toward what I hoped was the road. I don't know how long I wandered before I found it, a crumbling, abandoned house hidden deep in the woods. It looked ancient, its walls covered in moss and its windows shattered, but there was something about it, something that drew me, and despite every instinct screaming at me to turn around. Inside, the air was thick with decay and an overwhelming sense of dread. The walls were lined with old photographs, all of them faded and yellowed with age. Each one depicted the same figure, a person in a long coat, standing in the shadows of different places, an empty street, a desolate field, a snow-covered road. In every photo, the figure's face was obscured, but the coat was unmistakable. I found a journal on a rotting table in what might have once been the living room. Its pages were brittle, and the handwriting was erratic, scrawled as if in desperation. The entries told the story of a man who had once lived there, a recluse who spoke of a presence that stalked him relentlessly. He described the figure in the coat, its grinning face, and its black, soulless eyes. He wrote of how it would knock on his door, whisper his name, and follow him no matter where he went. The final entry was a single sentence, scrawled in large, shaky letters: "It doesn't want to kill you, it wants to break you." That was when I heard it again, the creak of the floorboards, this time coming from somewhere inside the house. I dropped the journal and bolted, crashing through the underbrush until I found the road. I didn't stop running until I saw headlights in the distance and flagged down a car. I don't know what that thing is, but I know now that it's not just me. It's been following others, maybe for years, maybe longer. It's something ancient, something evil, and it doesn't just haunt, it consumes. To the figure in the code, let's not meet, ever. It was supposed to be a simple night, like any other. I just moved into my first apartment on the outskirts of a small town. Nothing fancy, but cozy enough for someone living alone. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where the loudest sound at night was the hum of distant traffic or the occasional bark of a dog. It started around midnight. I was on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it, a faint knock on the window. It startled me because I lived on the second floor. My first thought was that it must have been my imagination. I went back to scrolling, convincing myself it was nothing, but a few minutes later, there it was again. Knock. This time, I froze. My apartment only had 2 windows, one in the living room and one in the bedroom, and both overlooked the quiet parking lot. I slowly turned to look at the window. The blinds were drawn, but I could see the faint outline of someone standing there. My heart raced. Who could possibly be outside my window on the second floor? I stayed completely still, hoping whoever it was would go away. The knocking stopped. Silence. I sat there, holding my breath, listening for any sign of movement. Then, I heard it again, but this time it came from my bedroom window. My stomach dropped. Whoever it was had moved. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was outside my apartment. They told me to stay on the line and lock myself in a room until the police arrived. I crept into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound, like metal against glass. My blood ran cold as I realized they were trying to pry open the bedroom window. The operator stayed on the line, assuring me that officers were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. The scraping stopped, and for a brief moment, I thought they might have given up. Then I heard it, footsteps inside my apartment. They'd gotten in. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from making any noise. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving through the apartment as if they were searching for something, or someone. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The bathroom door didn't have a lock, just a flimsy latch that wouldn't do much to keep anyone out. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom door. There was a long pause, and then knock. I don't think I've ever been so terrified in my life. The operator was telling me to stay calm, that the police were only minutes away, but I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The knocking came again, harder this time. "I know you're in there," a voice said. It was low and raspy, almost playful. "Why don't you come out?" Tears streamed down my face as I pressed myself tighter against the wall. The voice laughed, a chilling sound that made my skin crawl. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Silence. I stayed there, trembling, until I heard the distant sound of sirens. The police arrived moments later, bursting into the apartment. They found the window in the bedroom shattered and a rusty crowbar lying on the floor. Whoever it was had fled before they arrived. The officers searched the area but didn't find anyone. They told me I was lucky, that it could have ended much worse. I moved out of that apartment the next day, staying with a friend until I could find somewhere else to live. To this day, I still get chills thinking about that night. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, and I hope I never find out. A few weeks later, I got a call from the police. They had been investigating a series of break-ins in the area, and they thought the person who broke into my apartment might be connected. They asked me to come down to the station to look at some photos, just in case I recognized anyone. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I got there, they showed me a series of mugshots. My heart nearly stopped when I saw one of the faces. It was the man from that night. I was sure of it. The cold, piercing eyes, the thin, unsettling smile. I felt sick. That's him, I whispered. The officer nodded grimly. We've been tracking him for months. He's wanted for multiple counts of burglary and worse. You're lucky you got out unharmed. Hearing those words sent a fresh wave of terror through me. A week later, I got another call. This time, it wasn't the police, it was my friend. She lived a few blocks away and had just gotten home to find her back door open and her house ransacked. The police said it was likely the same man. He was still out there. For weeks, I barely slept. Every shadow seemed sinister. Every creak in the house sent my heart racing. Eventually, the calls from the police stopped and life slowly returned to normal. But even now, years later, I keep a bat by my bed and double check every lock before I sleep. I also invested in a security system. Cameras, motion detectors, and reinforced locks became a part of my daily life. I took self-defense classes, learning how to protect myself if something like this ever happened again. Friends and family started checking in on me more often, and I found a strange sense of comfort in their concern. Therapy helped too. At first, I was hesitant to talk to anyone about what happened, but opening up made the nightmares less frequent. My therapist suggested creating a safe space at my new home, a place where I could retreat and feel secure. I turned a small closet into a panic room, complete with a heavy-duty door and a spare phone. It sounds extreme, but it gave me peace of mind. Over time, I began to reclaim my sense of normalcy. I started going out more, enjoying life again, though I'll admit I'm more cautious than I used to be. I never leave windows unlocked, even during the day, and I always park under a street light when I'm out late. Some might call it paranoia, but for me, it's just being prepared. It wasn't until 3 years later that I had another encounter with the man who had invaded my life so thoroughly. I was walking home from work late one evening. It was a quiet night, just like the one when this all started. I had my headphones in, but I kept the volume low enough to stay aware of my surroundings, another habit I picked up. As I turned onto my street, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost a few houses down. Something about his posture and the way he watched me felt off. My heart started racing as I got closer, and then he stepped into the glow of the street light. My stomach dropped. It was him. He gave me that same thin, unsettling smile and started walking toward me. I froze for a moment, every instinct screaming at me to run, but instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the small canister of pepper spray I carried everywhere. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice stronger than I expected. He stopped, tilting his head as if considering his options. For a few tense moments, neither of us moved. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows. I ran the rest of the way home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. The police were at my house within minutes, but by then, he was long gone. They reassured me they would increase patrols in the area and urged me to stay alert. That night, I barely slept, but as scared as I was, I felt a small sense of victory. I had faced him and made it clear I wasn't the same terrified person I had been before. In the months that followed, I began to reflect on what it truly meant to rebuild trust, not just in others, but in myself. The fear had taken a piece of me, but with every small victory, I was reclaiming it. I joined a local community group focused on safety awareness, meeting others who had endured similar experiences. Together, we shared stories, offered support, and even hosted workshops to teach self-defense and security tips. Through these connections, I found a renewed sense of trust in humanity. I started opening up to new friendships, cautiously at first, but gradually allowing myself to believe that not everyone posed a threat. I even began dating again, though I was upfront about my past. To my surprise, most people were understanding, and one relationship in particular grew into something meaningful. While the scars of that night will never completely fade, I refuse to let them define me. Each step I take toward rebuilding my life feels like a triumph, a reminder that fear doesn't have to win. To the man who tried to break me, you didn't win, and if you ever try to come back into my life, I'll be ready. I've always been the kind of person who tries to avoid trouble. I lock my doors, double check my windows, and keep to myself. I'm not naive, just cautious, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened last month. I've lived in the same apartment for 5 years. It's a small, older building, but it's quiet, and most of the tenants have been here longer than I have. We nod at each other in the hallway but don't exchange more than pleasantries. It's perfect for someone like me who prefers solitude. A few weeks ago, I started noticing small things that were off. At first, it was subtle. My apartment keys were where I usually left them, or my blinds were slightly open when I was certain I'd closed them. I chalked it up to forgetfulness. We all have those days, right? But then, one evening, I came home to find my kitchen light on. I never leave it on. My stomach dropped, but nothing seemed out of place. I checked every room, my heart racing, but no one was there. I convinced myself I must have left it on by mistake. The next morning, I noticed something even stranger. On the living room floor, near the corner where my couch meets the wall, was a single, muddy footprint. Just one. It wasn't mine. I froze, staring at it, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe I'd tracked it in the night before, but how could it be just one footprint, and why here? I decided to install a cheap security camera in my living room, just for peace of mind. The setup was easy, and it connected directly to my phone. That night, I went to bed feeling slightly more secure. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed, motion detected, and half asleep, I opened the app, expecting to see a shadow or maybe my cat. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. There was a man standing in the middle of my living room, staring directly into the camera. He wasn't moving, just staring. He had a wild, disheveled look. His clothes were filthy, his hair matted, and his eyes his eyes were too wide, almost like he was forcing them to stay open. He didn't blink. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my phone and locking myself in the bathroom. My hand shook as I dialed 911. The operator's calm voice was the only thing keeping me from losing it completely. She told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes before I heard the knock on my door. I crept out of the bathroom and opened it to two uniformed officers. They searched my apartment thoroughly but found no sign of the man. No broken locks, no open windows, nothing. The footage was the only proof he'd been there. The officers took it as evidence and suggested I stay somewhere else for the night. I packed a bag and went to a friend's house, too shaken to stay in my apartment. The next day, I got a call from the police. They reviewed the footage and noticed something I hadn't. Before the man appeared in the living room, there was a moment where the camera caught movement in the background. He had come out of the crawl space in my ceiling. I didn't even know the crawl space existed. It's a small, nearly invisible hatch above a closet I rarely use. The police inspected it and found signs that someone had been living there, a dirty sleeping bag, food wrappers, and a notebook filled with incomprehensible scribbles. They estimated he'd been there for weeks, maybe months. I moved out the next day. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe again. To the man who lived in my crawl space, let's not meet. Never. But even after moving, the unease never fully left me. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of my vision felt like him. I started keeping a baseball bat by my bed and invested in a more sophisticated security system. Friends told me I was paranoid, that it was over, but the memory of his face, so close to the camera it felt like he was staring right through me, kept haunting me. About a week into my new place, I received an anonymous package. There was no return address, and the handwriting on the label was sloppy, almost childlike. Inside was a single item, the notebook the police had taken as evidence. The same one from the crawl space. My stomach flipped as I flipped through it, recognizing the same strange, manic scribbles. Only this time, there was something new. On the last page, written in large, uneven letters, was a single sentence: "You can't hide forever." I called the police immediately, but they couldn't trace where the package had come from. I've since moved again, this time to a completely different city. I've changed my phone number, my routines, everything. But no matter how far I go, I still check the ceilings of every place I stay. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up convinced I hear something moving just above me. A few nights ago, I had one of those dreams that feels too real. In it, I was lying in bed, unable to move. I could feel the weight of someone sitting at the edge of the mattress. My room was pitch black, but I could hear breathing, slow, deliberate. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then, the mattress shifted, as though the weight had lifted, and I woke up gasping for air. I told myself it was just a nightmare, but when I turned on the light, my blood froze. On the nightstand beside me was the notebook. I was sure I left it locked away in a box under my bed. The last page had been torn out. Panicking, I searched the apartment but found nothing out of place. I'm not sure what scares me more, the idea that someone had been in my room again, or that they had taken the page with them. The police have been less helpful this time. They think I'm imagining things, that I'm suffering from stress or paranoia. But I knew what I saw. Someone was here. Someone is still watching, and last night, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the vent in my bedroom. I tried to convince myself it was just the building settling, or maybe an animal outside. But as I lay there, frozen, the tapping turned into scratching. And then, unmistakably, a voice whispered my name. I haven't slept since. I've decided to leave again, to pack my things and go as far away as possible. But before I do, I'm going to seal every vent, every crawl space, every crack in this apartment. Because if there's there's one thing I've learned, it's that he's always watching, always waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that this time, he's closer than ever. Tonight, as I finished packing, I found something that stopped me cold. Tucked into the corner of my suitcase was a small, folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I opened it. Written in the same jagged, uneven handwriting as the notebook was a chilly message. Why are you running? I don't know how he got to my apartment again, or how he knew I was leaving. I'm writing this from a motel several hours away, but I'm still looking over my shoulder. Every noise outside the door, every shadow under the streetlights feels like him. But here's the twist I never expected. As I checked out of the motel this morning, the front desk clerk handed me a package. My heart sank as I saw the same handwriting scrawled across the top. I opened it right there, unable to stop myself. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of me sitting on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the wall. The timestamp on the photo was from just an hour earlier. I'm not alone, even here. I don't know how he's following me, or how he stayed one step ahead, but he's always there, watching, waiting, and I'm starting to think that no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, he'll always find me. This morning, I decided to try one last thing. I bought a burner phone and set up a camera outside my motel door. If he's following me, I'll catch him. The footage, however, only deepened my terror. When I checked it, the feed showed nothing out of the ordinary for hours, just the hallway quiet and still. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the screen glitched for a few seconds, and suddenly he was there, not walking into view or stepping out of a room, just there, standing perfectly still, facing the camera. It was like he appeared out of nowhere, and then, just as quickly, he was gone. I rewound the footage over and over, trying to make sense of it. There's no way to explain what I saw. It wasn't humanly possible. My mind is racing with questions I don't want answered. Who is Eddie? What does he want? And, most terrifying of all, how does he keep finding me? I'm leaving again tonight, but I'm not sure it will matter. I can't shake the feeling that this is bigger than me, that he isn't just a man. The way he moves, the way he seems to know my every step, it's like he's something else entirely. Something relentless, something unstoppable. If you're reading this, please be careful. Check your ceilings, your vents, your crawl spaces. And if you ever feel like you're being watched, don't ignore it. Because sometimes, no matter how far you run, there's something or someone that will never stop following you. I'm not sure why I'm finally writing this. Maybe because the nightmares have started again, or maybe because I need someone else to know what happened, even if it makes no sense. It's been years, but the memory is still as fresh as if it happened yesterday. I was 17 and had just gotten my first car, a beat-up old Honda Civic that rattled whenever it went over 60. It wasn't much, but it was freedom. I lived in a rural area, and driving meant I could finally escape the monotony of cornfields and small-town gossip. One summer evening, I decided to take the back roads for a drive. Just me, the hum of my engine, and the endless stretch of farmland. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. I had my windows down, enjoying the cool breeze and the faint smell of fresh-cut hay. There wasn't another car in sight, and the only sounds were the occasional cricket and the crunch of gravel under my tires. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. I'd driven that road dozens of times, but that night, something felt off. It was hard to explain, a kind of heaviness in the air, like the world was holding its breath. I told myself I was just being silly and kept going. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe a stray dog. Something was moving in the drainage ditch that ran alongside the road. But as I got closer, I realized it was a man. He was hunched over, his back to me, digging at the dirt with his hands. His clothes were filthy, and his movements were frantic, almost animalistic. I slowed down, unsure of what I was seeing. Was he hurt? Did he need help? My gut screamed at me to keep driving, but my stupid teenage brain decided to stop. I pulled over a few yards ahead and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" He froze. Slowly, he turned to look at me, and my stomach dropped. His face was wrong. His eyes were too wide, like he was trying to take in everything all at once. His mouth hung open, showing teeth that were yellowed and too sharp. But what really got me was the way he smiled. It wasn't a smile of gratitude or relief. It was a predator's smile. "Help me," he said, his voice gravelly and broken. He stood up, and I realized just how tall he was. He had to be at least 6.5 feet, his limbs long and gangly like a spider. His clothes hung off him, too big and too small all at once, and his hands were caked with mud and something darker. I stammered something, I don't even remember what, and started backing toward my car. He took a step toward me, his movements jerky and unnatural. "Don't go," he said. "Stay. I need your help." Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. I turned and bolted from my car, fumbling with the door handle. Behind me, I heard him start to laugh. It was a horrible, wet sound, like he was choking on it. I managed to get the door open and jumped inside, slamming it shut and locking it. As I started the car, I risked a glance back. He was standing in the middle of the road now, his head tilted to the side like he was confused. but that smile was still there, stretched impossibly wide. I floored it, gravel flying as I sped away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him drop to all fours and scuttle back into the ditch, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't stop driving until I reached home, where I locked every door and window in the house. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? It's been years, but I still avoid that road, and sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear that laugh, faint and wet, echoing in the dark. To the man in the drainage ditch, let's not meet. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but about 6 months ago, I moved to a new city for work. It's a few states away from where I grew up, a bigger place with better opportunities. I thought I could finally put the memory behind me. For a while, I did. Last week, I was taking my dog for a late night walk around my apartment complex. It was quiet, the kind of stillness that always made me feel uneasy. My dog, usually happy and curious, kept stopping to sniff the air, his tail tucked between his legs. I tried to brush it off, but the familiar heaviness in the air was back. That's when I heard it, faint at first, like it was coming from far away. It laughed, wet and broken. My blood ran cold. I froze, straining to hear, but it stopped. My dog whined and tugged at the leash, desperate to go back inside. I didn't argue. That night, I dreamed of the drainage ditch, of the man. He was standing outside my apartment window, his face pressed against the glass, smiling. Now, every time I take my dog out, I feel like I'm being watched. I've checked the locks on my doors and windows 100 times, but it doesn't help. That laugh is always in the back of my mind. Last night, it escalated. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of scratching at my front door. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Long, slow scrapes that made the hairs on my arms stand up. My dog growled low in his throat, something he's never done before. I grabbed a baseball bat I keep under my bed and crept toward the door. The scratching stopped, but as I got closer, I heard it. That laugh. It was louder now, right on the other side of the door. My hand froze on the doorknob, and for a second, I thought about opening it just to see. But then I remembered that smile, those teeth, and I backed away. I stayed up the rest of the night, clutching the bat and jumping at every creak of the apartment. By morning, there was no sign anyone had been there. No scratches, no footprints, just the memory of that laugh echoing in my head. I don't know what he is or how he found me, but I'm starting to think moving won't help. I've looked into breaking my lease and leaving the city altogether, but I can't shake the feeling that it won't matter. This morning, I found something by my front door, a small, mud-caked object wrapped in a tattered piece of cloth. My hand shook as I unwrapped it, revealing a fragment of bone, human, by the look of it. Attached was a note, scrawled in dark, dried ink, "You promised to help." I packed my things in a frenzy, leaving most of my belongings behind. My dog and I hit the road, driving aimlessly for hours. I thought maybe if I kept moving, I could outrun whatever this was. I stopped only when exhaustion forced me to. A cheap motel on the outskirts of a small town seemed safe enough. That night, I barricaded the door with furniture and kept the lights on. My dog curled up by my side, whimpering softly. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., the power went out. The room plunged into darkness, and the silence was suffocating. I held my breath, straining to hear anything over the pounding of my heart. Then, the laugh came, wet and broken, louder than it had ever been. It wasn't outside the door anymore. It was in the room. My dog started barking, his teeth bared, but I couldn't see anything. I swung the bat blindly, screaming for it to leave me alone. The laugh faded, but the room felt colder, emptier. When the power came back on, there was no one there, but scratched into the wall above the bed were 3 words, "You can't run." I've never been one to scare easily. I used to think horror stories were just exaggerated tales to spook others, and I never expected to have my own story to tell. But what happened to me one night has changed the way I see the world. If you're reading this, please don't make the same mistake I did. It was a cold November evening, and I was driving home after visiting a friend who lived a few hours away. The stretch of road between her house and mine was mostly empty fields and the occasional gas station. I wasn't worried. I'd made the drive plenty of times before, but this time I was running low on gas. Around 11 p.m., I spotted a gas station, its neon lights flickering against the dark sky. It looked old and run down, the kind of place you'd only stop at if you didn't have a choice. Unfortunately, I didn't. My fuel gauge was dangerously close to empty, so I pulled in. The lot was empty except for a beat-up truck parked on the side. The station itself had a single flickering overhead light and a dingy convenience store with a cracked glass door. I stepped out of my car, the cold biting at my skin, and started filling up my tank. That's when I saw him. The man was standing by the truck, watching me. He wasn't doing anything, just leaning against the driver's side door, his hands in his pockets, staring. He was tall, maybe in his mid-40s, with unkempt hair and a face that seemed both expressionless and menacing at the same time. I tried to ignore him, telling myself he was probably just another late-night traveler, but something about the way he stood there, so still and deliberate, made my skin crawl. I finished pumping gas as quickly as I could, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. He hadn't moved. His eyes followed me the entire time. When I got back into my car, I locked the doors and started the engine. I expected him to leave me alone once I was driving away, but as I pulled out of the station, his truck's headlights came on. He started following me. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was headed the same way. But when I turned onto a side road that led directly to my neighborhood, a road that no one else ever took, his truck turned too. My heart started pounding. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it was all in my head. But then he sped up. I pushed the gas pedal harder, trying to put some distance between us, but his truck stayed close, the headlights almost blinding me in my rearview mirror. I turned onto another side road, this one even more remote, hoping to loosen it. That's when he turned off his headlights. I could barely see him in the darkness, but I knew he was still there. The faint outline of his truck loomed behind me, and I could feel his presence, heavy and oppressive, like a predator stalking its prey. I panicked. I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I told the dispatcher what was happening. She stayed on the line with me, guiding me toward the nearest police station. I didn't care about going home anymore, I just wanted to be somewhere safe. The truck followed me the entire way, headlights off, until I pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of the police station. The dispatcher had told me to stay in my car until an officer came out, so I sat there, trembling, watching the entrance. But when I looked back, the truck was gone. The police took my statement and told me they'd patrol the area, but they didn't seem overly concerned. They chalked it up to a possible drunk driver or a prankster trying to scare me. But I knew it wasn't just that. The way he stared at me, the way he followed me, the way he turned off his headlights, it wasn't random. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining his face in the shadows, his truck waiting outside my window. Every time I drove at night, I checked my rearview mirror obsessively, half expecting to see those headlights behind me. About a month later, I decided to drive out to my friend's place again. I thought enough time had passed and that it was probably safe. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the man wouldn't still be out there. I left earlier this time, planning to be home well before dark. As the sun set, I felt the same unease I had that night at the gas station. The fields seemed darker, the roads lonelier. I kept my eyes on the fuel gauge, making sure I wouldn't need to stop again. But about halfway through the drive, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was the truck, the same beat-up truck from the gas station, parked off the side of the road. The man was standing next to it, staring at the passing cars. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white. He didn't move as I drove past, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. And then, in my rearview mirror, I saw his headlights come on. This time, I didn't hesitate. I floored it, my car roaring down the empty road. My heart felt like it was going to explode as the truck's headlights grew closer and closer. I swerved onto another road, then another, hoping to lose him, but he stayed behind me, relentless. I thought about calling the police again, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the car on the road. I saw a sign for a rest stop ahead and decided to take the chance. The rest stop was small, just a few vending machines and a bathroom, but it was well lit. I pulled in and parked near the lights, my heart pounding as I waited to see if he would follow. The truck drove past, its headlights sweeping across the lot. I held my breath, watching as it disappeared into the distance. I waited there for what felt like hours, afraid to leave, afraid he might still be out there. When I finally worked up the courage to drive home, it was nearly midnight. I didn't see the truck again, but the fear stayed with me. Even now, I can't drive at night without feeling like he's still out there, waiting for me to let my guard down. 2 weeks later, it happened again, but this time, it was different. I was walking to my car after a late shift at work. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit by a few flickering overhead lights. As I approached my car, I felt it, that same oppressive heaviness in the air. I turned, and there he was, the man from the gas station. He was leaning against a lamppost, just far enough away to blend into the shadows. But I could see his face, that expressionless, almost predatory stare. I froze. My keys were in my hand, but I couldn't move. He took a step forward, slow and deliberate. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. He stopped just short of the light, his face barely illuminated, and smiled. It was the most chilling thing I've ever seen. "I've been waiting," he said, his voice low and gravelly. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I bolted from my car, unlocking it with shaking hands and jumping inside. As I started the engine, I saw him in the rearview mirror. He was just standing there, watching. But as I sped out of the lot, I swear I saw his truck parked at the far end, headlights off, waiting. I drove straight to the police station again, but just like before, there was no trace of him by the time I arrived. They told me they'd increased patrols near my workplace, but I could tell they didn't really believe me. Now, I'm afraid to go anywhere alone. I've started seeing his truck more often, parked in places it shouldn't be, always far enough away to make me doubt myself, but close enough to keep me on edge. I don't know what he wants, but I'll just stick to myself. This happened about 5 years ago, but I still think about it every time I'm walking home at night. I had just moved to a new town for college and was renting a little apartment off campus. It was in a pretty quiet neighborhood, mostly small houses and tree-lined streets. During the day, it was cozy, almost picturesque. At night, though, the shadows cast by those same trees made everything feel but I'm not one to get spooked easily, and I like the peacefulness of my late night walks. One evening, after a long shift at the campus library, I started my usual 15-minute walk home. It was around 10 p.m. and the streets were completely empty. The air was crisp, and I had my headphones in, playing one of those lofi beats to relax playlists. Everything seemed normal. At first, I was halfway home when I noticed something strange. One of the large oak trees a little ahead on my route had a person in it. At least, that's what it looked like. There was someone crouched on one of the thicker branches, about 10 feet up. They weren't moving, just sitting there, hunched over like they were trying to blend in with the leaves. I stopped walking and stared, half convinced I was imagining it. The figure was too still, almost statue-like. I took out my headphones to listen, but all I could hear was the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, just as I convinced myself it was probably some weird optical illusion, the figure shifted, slowly, deliberately. I don't know how to describe the way they moved except to say it wasn't normal. It wasn't just someone adjusting their position, it was more like a predator repositioning itself. That's when I realized they were looking at me. I couldn't see their face clearly, too many shadows, but I knew their head was turned toward me. I felt the instinctive rush of fear but forced myself to act casual. I turned around, pulled out my phone, and pretended to take a call as I briskly walked back the way I came. My heart was pounding, but I didn't dare run. I thought if I ran, whoever or whatever that was might come after me. When I reached the main road, I finally allowed myself to breathe. There were a few cars passing by, and the presence of other people made me feel safer. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? There's a creepy person sitting in a tree. They'd probably think I was crazy. I decided to take the long way home, sticking to well-lit streets. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure following me. Thankfully, I made it home without any further incidents. For weeks, I avoided that part of the neighborhood at night. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. Maybe it was just some kid pulling a prank or a homeless person trying to find a safe spot to sleep. I told myself it was nothing, until a few months later, the neighbor I'd gotten friendly with, a retired guy named Mr. Jensen, was making small talk with me one morning. He mentioned something that made my stomach drop. Apparently, several people in the area had seen a man sitting in trees late at night. No one could ever get a good look at him, and he always disappeared before the police arrived. Mr. Jensen said the guy had been spotted closer to my building recently and joked that I should keep my windows locked. I laughed nervously and nodded, but that night, I double-checked every lock in my apartment. To this day, I have no idea who or what I saw in that tree, and to the man in the tree, let's not meet. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.